Welcome back. Let's go ahead and go through the solutions for HTML Assessment 2. All right, here I have an HTML file, and right now it's linked to this empty browser page. So I'm going to start off just by typing out HTML and autofilling what we need here. And most of our work, pretty much all our work, is going to happen here in the body. So let's start off by creating that heading 1, which we saw was the puppy adoption page. And then I believe there was another heading 2 just asking for more information. So we'll just say, please enter information. It's up to you how much detail you wanted to provide in those heading 2s. Again, we're not worried about matching the exact text, just matching the ideas of creating a form. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and create that form. So we'll type out form, hit enter, and we're not going to worry about a class because that's for CSS, and in this case, we won't really worry about having a redirect for the action. Instead, we'll just have the method be get. That way we can make sure that we're actually grabbing information from the form and passing it through to the URL upon submission of the page. The first thing we wanted to do was add inputs for first name, last name, email, and password. And all of those inputs also had labels. So let's create a very generic label input pair. So we'll say label for, and then an input here, and we'll give it an ID tag as well. And right now this will just be empty. So I'm going to copy and paste these a couple of times. We have one for first name, another for last name, another for the email, and another for the password. And then in between first and last, email and password, I'm going to insert a little break here. That way we can start a new line. And you can do this either by just inserting a paragraph tag with a closing paragraph tag, or by inserting a line breaker, which is just a BR tag. All right, now that we've done that, let's actually create these. So we'll start with the label for first name, and we'll say this is for first. We'll give it an ID that matches first, and this type is going to be a text type. And we can go ahead and remove the value and instead replace it with a placeholder. So we'll say placeholder is equal to first name. We'll hit save, and let's refresh just to make sure we're right along the same path. So I have first name, and I have that first name placeholder, and now I need to add the labels for these other boxes here, these other inputs. So we'll do that as well. So we'll say last, and match that up with last ID, and then we'll say last name, colon, and then we'll have that have a placeholder as well. So we'll say placeholder is equal to last name, save that, and let's fill that in for the email and password as well. So we'll say for email, connect it with the ID, and then we'll do the same here. For the password, we'll say for pass, connect it with that. Remember, these are essentially just arbitrary string choices. They just need to match up with the for and the ID. And then we'll say email for that label, and we'll say password here. And we'll also want to change the email and password to reflect their specific input types. So we'll say type is email, and we'll say type here is password. And if you want, you can have a placeholder here as well instead of a value. So we'll say placeholder. And for that placeholder, I'll just say email@email.com. Save that. Let's refresh, see if it's working. All right, looks good. We have first name, last name, email, and password. Now we also want to ask the user if they're over the age of 18 so they can adopt this puppy. So then inside the form, I'm going to create just that paragraph asking, are you over 18? And we want to actually have a radio button, and we want to make sure they're connected. So we'll have a label, and we'll say this is for yes. So we'll say yes, this person's over 18, and that's going to be an input of type radio, and we'll say the name here is over 18. So it doesn't really matter what you call this name-wise, it just matters that when you create the next radio button, you make sure they connect with the same name. So I will copy this label and this input, and have it here, and let's make one for no. And then we still have the same name, and then the values, we'll go ahead and pass back something like yes over and no over. And remember, when you actually hit submit, this is the name value pair that's going to be connected with this actual choice on the radio button. Let's make sure these are working. I'm going to save this, refresh, So it says, are you over 18? If I select yes, and then select no, my radio button only allows one to be selected. So they are successfully linked there. Finally, let's add in that drop-down menu. So we'll say, do you have credit card or PayPal? So we'll say, do you have credit card, just CC, or PayPal? And then for this, we'll use the select tag, and we can not worry about the class for now since we won't be adding style to it. And for the name, I'll just say something like payment. And then let's add in an option. So the option here, we'll say the CC is the value we pass back. And then we'll say credit card is the option in the drop-down menu. We'll create one more option, and we'll say PP here for PayPal. There we go. Save that. Let's refresh, make sure it's working. So we see yes or no, credit card, or PayPal. And then finally, let's add in a submit button. So after this, still inside the form, I'll say input, type, submit, and then let's add in a value here. Submit feedback or submit choice or just submit. Doesn't really matter what you call it. Refresh, and now I see all these options. Okay, let's make sure this all works. I'll just say Al is the first name, and then we'll say Smith is the last name. Email, we'll say email@email.com, just something really simple. Password, I'll just say pass. Over 18, and I'm using a credit card. Hit submit, and we should see this page refresh. There we go, and if you look at the top, you should begin to see those name-value pairs. Now, if you didn't define any name-value pairs for some of these, maybe you didn't define a name-value pair for first name or last name, then you won't see them here in the URL. If you want to see them, all you need to do is come back here and then provide them. So for example, first name, I didn't see that in the URL because it has no name-value pair. We just need to provide a name for this. So we can say first, last, save that, refresh here, and then we'll do this again. Just say Al, and then last name Smith. Let's say e@e.com. Just some letters there for the password. Submit again, and now you should begin to see the first and last up here in the URL. Okay, that's the very basics of HTML forms. Again, keep in mind later on in the future, we'll really be using Flask's own built-in library to automatically create the HTML here for us. But it's important to understand what the real HTML code underneath would look like that Flask is going to generate. Okay, that ends your HTML crash course. Hopefully it should have been pretty straightforward. Not a whole lot we need to cover in order to understand how to work with the basics of HTML with Flask. Up next, we'll discuss CSS for styling our actual websites. Then after that, we'll talk about Bootstrap, which has its own built-in classes to make your websites look nice. Then we'll be ready for Python and Flask. We'll see you there.